Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, speaking to you from the Muslim Media Hub. This Ramadan, we're dealing with faith and doubt. 30 big questions about belief. Today, the question we want to address is, why does the Quran speak of harsh punishments? In answer to that, let me start by mentioning that there is a verse in the Quran, in Surah Az-Zumar, the 39th chapter of the Quran, the 16th verse, which says, ذَلِكَ يُخَوِّفُ اللَّهُ بِهِ عِبَادَهُ يَا عِبَادِ فَاتَّقُونَ. Thus, God, that is a sort of punishment that God threatens his servants with. And then God appeals to his servants, Ya ibadi fattakun, O my servants, be aware of me, or of your duty towards me. So this verse captures two ideas at once. One is that, yes, there are harsh punishments that are being mentioned. And two, the real thought that the servants of God should be having is not so much the fear of that punishment, but the desire to achieve taqwa or piety, the closeness and awareness of God. In fact, that is the thing that we are told that Ramadan fasting is about. When the Quran says, "Kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun," Surah 2, verse 183. It says, fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may achieve taqwa. So that's that word taqwa, which means the awareness or being careful. That is the one, the verbal form, which is being used now in the verse that I cited earlier from the 39th chapter. Ya ibadi fattakun, O my servants, be aware of your duty towards me. So have that taqwa towards me. It's not so much the fear of that punishment. But the mention of harsh punishments, especially in the life hereafter, was necessary at the time because that is what people feared when they looked at the potentates of the day and of past history, like the Pharaoh, for example. These potentates threatened very harsh punishments. And for example, when the magicians wanted to believe in Moses, on whom be peace, the Pharaoh threatened them that he's going to cut off their arms and legs from opposite sides, and he's going to crucify them on the trunks of palm trees. He's going to impale them on the trunks. So that kind of frightening and harsh reality is what earlier societies dealt with. So you either complied or you paid very harsh penalties. To counter that, the Quran, on the other hand, is calling people towards what is good, but in order to help them and motivate them towards what is good, the Quran does two things. One is offers them great rewards in the life hereafter and betterment and prosperity in this life, but also on the flip side, very harsh punishments if they fail to comply. Now, punishments are often in the Quran mentioned with regards to the life hereafter, but the Quran is also a legal system, and so the Quran also prescribed penalties, judicial penalties, to be executed in this world for certain crimes. And yes, some of these penalties can be seen to be harsh, but bear in mind that in ancient societies, penalties were generally harsh. If one goes to London and visits, some of the tourist attractions there, including like the London Dungeon and some other such sites, one will find, something about the history there and about the history of harsh punishments. That is the reality that people dealt with in the past. So in order for Islamic law to be applied effectively in its environment when it was first introduced some 1400 years ago, the Quran mentioned some such harsh punishments, like, for example, the amputation of the hand for stealing, or the capital punishment, and so on. Now, capital punishment survived as a law in some states in the United States up until recently, and perhaps it is still the case that in many nation states within the United States and elsewhere, that capital punishment is still a reality. Things, develop and grow and change gradually over time and due to experience. The important thing to ask about a legal system is how effective it is in promoting peace, in safeguarding among the citizens of a land in maintaining justice and fairness for everyone. Now, of course, in modern times, the tendency generally is to reduce punishments. We don't think of punishments in a law to be so much punitive, but we think of it to be reformative, and we think of rehabilitating criminals and so on. So there is scope in Islamic law for jurists to use ijtihad and look at some of the punishments that were mentioned, see the context in which they were mentioned, and ask about whether the context has changed enough for us to now revisit some of these punishments. When we look at the Quran, for example, and its commentary, we see that the penalty for stealing, yes, appears harsh in our present times, but at the time when it was first mentioned, this was normal across the board. This is what other societies did. Ibn Kathir, for example, in his commentary on the Quran, says that the penalty of cutting off the hand of the thief was already there prior to the religion of Islam, and the Quran just simply is sanctioning that already known penalty. There is scope in modern times for Muslim scholars to revisit some of these laws and ask how much of it is applicable in our present times, or can it be possible to maintain peace and justice and fairness and all of those good outcomes with some sort of modification of some of the classical items of Islamic law. So then in sum, two sets of punishments we talked about: punishment in the life hereafter and punishment in the penal system of Islam here in this world. Yes, these appear to be harsh, but that has to be seen against the backdrop of the social context in which the Quran was already speaking. And that social context was one in which harsh punishments were generally meted out in order for the Quran to capture the attention of its listeners and motivate people to do what is good. The Quran emphasized betterment in this life and everlasting bliss in the life hereafter. But on the flip side, unfortunately, also the reality of harsh punishments to be meted out in this life in the application of Islamic law, and also even harsher still, punishments in the life hereafter for miscreants and those who flout and reject the commandments and regulations and revelations from God. But there is scope when it comes to the legal systems and the laws to be applied on this land and in this world for Muslim scholars to use ijtihad, or the practice of thinking deeply about the application of the Quran, and to apply it in a way that will seem, even in modern times, to be fair and just, and that will produce the good outcomes of fairness and justice and safety for everyone. That's all for today. I'm your brother in faith, Shabir Ally, speaking to you from the Muslim Media Hub. Join me again tomorrow for another one of these intriguing big questions. We're dealing with faith and doubt, 30 big questions about belief. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Tired of seeing how Muslims are portrayed in the media? You can help. Support Muslim Media Hub, the first of its kind to empower young people to produce content for film, TV, and social media. Be part of our journey at muslimmediahub.com.